to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann. You can call me H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal. You can call me Q.
I woke up yesterday with a real sore neck, and I've just been
You're kidding me.
It's been terrible for the last couple of days. You sleep on it wrong, and then you're just out for like half a week.
Seriously, same exact thing happened to me at the same exact time. So we've got podcaster neck or something like that. Yeah, it's amazing. The older you get, the more you're like, okay, this is going to ruin my like Monday through Thursday.
I was thinking, speaking of neck pains, it would be a really funny idea for like a sketch for a depressed vampire who's just eating somebody because he's bored, and then the person that he's like sucking the blood from is complaining about it the whole time. And this vampire is all kind of like self-pitying and stuff, and the other guy is like, hey, come on, it's worse for me, you know.
I have been meaning to recommend to you a show and a movie. You probably have heard of the movie. Maybe even you've seen the show, but have you seen What We Do in the Shadows?
No, I haven't.
It's a movie by, I believe it's Taika Waititi, Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords. They play kind of a group of vampire roommates. Little drama ensues with vampire politics, so to speak. But I guess it was a successful enough movie or enough of a proof of concept that they also pitched it. And now it's a TV show on FX.
Wow.
It just finished its first season. I'm like halfway through the first season of the TV show, but it is, I think, so far as good as the movie. If you really love that sort of very strange, almost, I guess New Zealand humor is the only way to describe it. But
Okay.
There's all these sorts of like jokes of they have a spat with the werewolves, and the head of the werewolves is like, somebody says something really mean, and he's like, come on guys, we're werewolves, not swearwolves. It's just all sorts of, they love a good pun. I really think if you have time, sit down this weekend and spend some time with either the movie or the TV show. I think the TV show's on Hulu.
All right, yeah, I'll check it out. Anyways, let's get to some video game pitches for today. I'm just realizing, as of right now, that if my numbers are correct, this is our Halloween episode coming out on Halloween. So good movie recommendation. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. Well, I meant to tell you this, but if you're listening to Sound of Play this week, I think while in your absence, I did a bit of an episode with our good friend Huel.
Oh, really? Well, I'll have to tune in and find out what that's all about.
Yeah.
Probably pretty bad.
Come on, I love Huel. He did bring a spooky energy, so if you love spooky energy, he's got it.
Like that spooky energy. Anyways, today I'm going to be going first, and I want to pitch something that personally kind of creeps me out for Halloween. So I have many things that I'm afraid of, and one of them is the kind of deep sea where it gets dark and there's just like monster fish down there. So, you know, that whole situation.
I don't know what's happening this week, but we keep finding out we have weird things in common, and maybe this is what
after all this time.
Yeah, literally, audience, if you're listening to this together, we sometimes discover facts about each other on the show during recording, and I have to tell you, somehow the fact that we never met and weren't best friends before this show started is amazing to me. All right, sorry, underwater scary monsters.
So this might be a real journey for both of us then. So what I want is kind of a Sea of Thieves or a No Man's Sky like exploration game set underwater. This is quasi MMO, but kind of like in No Man's Sky, the underwater ocean world is so big that you're not really going to often run across somebody. And it's basically a world of submarine exploration. So... You know, you're cruising around, you can visit, of course, all the beautiful places like the coral. You can go to all the terrible places, like down in the trenches where it's really dangerous, and you see a light off in the distance, and you don't know, is it another submarine or is it a bioluminescent fish? Is it an anglerfish with one of its danglies trying to lure you in? So
an angler dangly.
Yeah, right, angler dangly. So let's go ahead and start the clock there and see what this underwater world has in store for us.
Well, right off the bat, I really like this because it's giving me vibes. Oh my God, now I can't summon the name of the game. It's mostly an underwater game.
Is this Abzu, maybe?
No, it's not Abzu. Oh my goodness.
Echo the Dolphin.
It's like a survival game. Hold on, now I need to.
Subnautica?
Subnautica. There it is, Subnautica.
Oh, this is one of your favorite games. Come on, man.
Yeah, okay. So this is giving me huge Subnautica vibes. The reason being is like that feeling, I think, of a little bit of the fear of the size and the scope of what lies beneath is really, really key to the Subnautica experience. It asks you to sort of feel afraid about those things. And knowing that you can always go deeper and finding systems of reward to encourage you to explore further or explore farther away could be really interesting, especially if you have a chance of like running into a person.
Mm-hmm. So what do the encounters look like? Because Sea of Thieves, I understand, you can board somebody else's ship, but everything as far as kind of personal interaction becomes a lot more do or die the deeper underwater you get. You can't easily exit your submarine and cross over to somebody else's.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can. Maybe that's a part of it. Maybe it's like Outer Wilds where you can just kind of like put on your suit, get out of your ship and, float around for a little bit.
Well, one thing that is, I might be in Subnautica, I don't know, but I think having a mechanic where your submarine needs to be upgraded in some particular way for you to be able to go down layers, and maybe even whatever suit you have to survive a ship-to-ship travel also could be upgraded in that same like plating reinforcement. Obviously, water pressure is growing more and more intense until you're, I would imagine, down at the most lower levels of this world, you're actually dealing with things that are so compressed they're like crystals, just like gorgeous rock formations and all this stuff that's been hyper compressed. It's like how coal becomes diamond. So maybe you get this really, if you can illuminate it in some way with your ship or something, some really dramatic looking scenery down there.
Let's see. So this idea of upgrading your submarine, obviously that makes for a nice progression forward. One of the interesting things about Outer Wilds was the fact that like there's very little actual upgrading that happens in the game.
Yeah.
There's maybe only kind of one portion of the game where you're really, and that's not even an upgrade to you. You're kind of like fixing some, anyways, I don't need to get into that, but like it feels like the world is always open to you. It's just your personal understanding of how to navigate it that is preventing you from accessing certain areas. And your progression is pushed forward by you learning how the physics and the rules of the world end up working. So I don't know if we need to get, go too far in that direction, but I also don't want to overwhelm players with, if new players are not able to kind of keep up with the more experienced players, then as far as the upgrades and stuff go, I don't want it to just be like a game of whoever has the most powerful submarine is gonna be the victor in any confrontation.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. One of the things that I think is maybe the upgrading route or something, I think you want to more kind of give somebody the ability to do something special with the upgrade. Obviously or maybe you don't limit it through upgrade, instead you limit it through fuel consumption or something. I think No Man's Sky has that sort of very smart, you do have to fuel your, boosters and stuff to get to the next planet. So when it's time to move on, and it encourages you in a way to slow down or stay still for a little bit. And maybe that's more necessary here. You want to pace things out.
I guess then the underwater exploration would be kind of grounded by these, I don't want to say different settlements, but different, like, not even rooms, but different biomes that you're kind of moving between, areas where you can restock on supplies, because obviously a lot of the ocean is just kind of empty space, as you're kind of moving between things. But how does it work in Subnautica? How do they, when you're out in the open ocean where there realistically should be a lot of nothing in every direction, how do they keep that part interesting?
Well, Subnautica does contain the space. So venturing out away from your base, away from food or oxygen or water for too long, you find yourself needing to sort of return. But there's also mechanics where you are building up more additional base, and you can either have like little substations, or you can have expansions of your base by adding on large new portions of it, and then you're sort of building a home, which is great. That's very sort of No Man's Sky like, where you're attaching these large sections, and then you can sort of walk around the floor. And I don't want to spoil too much for people who are interested in playing Subnautica, but there's even some mechanics in Subnautica that sort of hint at something potentially in the distance. And then the game, if you decide to pursue, just kind of, I don't want to say too much, but connect some dots, use your own logical mind, and pursue an idea that you might have in exploration, and you find yourself on mini islands, and you find yourself in increasingly escalating situations that are telling a bit of a story of lore. So maybe in this MMO about the ocean, there are storytelling bits about the world, or maybe it's an entire planet that is sunk, and so you're kind of piecing together the history of the planet as you go around and explore and extract things from different ships and vessels that you're able to visit.
Maybe the cities, the ruins of the world, are kind of on the deepest level. I guess I don't really know how that would work. Maybe the entire globe is, I don't know, maybe all the land sunk into the sea. I'm not sure how physically it would happen, or if a bunch of water just kind of appeared from a water meteorite coming through space. Just a big globe of water crashed into the earth.
And you don't necessarily have to be that on the nose, right? The thing that caused the whole thing could have just sunk to the core of the planet or something like that. So you're kind of marching towards a path of No Man's Sky wants you to get to the center of the universe, right? Mm-hmm. And the sort of conceit about the center of the universe in that game, which I will spoil, is that, surprise, you just kind of go to a new universe. And it is procedural, and it is never ending. So maybe there's getting to the core of this planet is a black hole device or something that can take you to a new planet or something like that, if you wanted to do that sort of scale.
Well, I do like the idea of things becoming more familiar as you're diving deeper into the planet, and as you're diving deeper into the ocean, and it's not until kind of the end game that you really come across the cities and the things that are the most I don't want to say natural, but the most human. And you're exploring these ruins, and it's the darkest part of the ocean and the scariest fish all around and stuff. I could see that as being a great climax to the game.
I even love the idea, and this is a kind of a common mechanic or common trope in dystopian sort of movies and fiction, where you have a character who's really isolated, really alone, and they're on a journey of survival towards something that may or may not be a promised land. I love the idea of players that do reach the core of the planet, or really close to the core of the planet. You almost get that sort of Matrix Zion thing happening, where maybe technology that you've collected along the way, or abilities that you've garnered, tools that you've learned to use to maybe build up little bases, and maybe building bases or finding like small temporary shell housing is how you save, or how you like mark your progress in your space. If down towards the center of the planet, you have people who have completely repurposed houses and actual structures and facilities that are down there, and you have a thriving city player base. And, like a Final Fantasy RPG, it takes you 80 hours to get to the good stuff. But once you're down there, you get to live in this like Atlantis underwater city with all the players that made it.
Well, let's close that down and let's come up with a name.
I was thinking of this has to be taken. Endless Ocean kind of came to mind.
Endless Ocean, that sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Yes, there is Endless Ocean 1 and 2 on the Nintendo Wii.
How can we
underwater
forget?
Exploration game.
Well, we may have accidentally created a game similar to Endless Ocean, haven't we?
I think it's different in tone.
If we were going to do a cheeky playwright title, we might say Surprisingly Deep.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Oh gosh, what is
It's kind of terrible.
Deep? There has to be a really good zinger on that one.
One of my favorite songs from a video game that I think was on my first episode of Sound of Play, if it isn't shame on me, is a song from the PlayStation 1 game Into the Deep.
If this was a sequel, it could just be called Into the Deeper.
Into the Deeper.
There's Off the Deep End, of course, like the Weird Al Yankovic album.
Off the Deep End. Into Deeper is pretty bad as well.
Into Deeper.
Maybe Deeper is just a better name for this game.
Deeper's not bad. That's kind of a funny sound to it when you just say it by itself.
Yeah, I'm playing Deeper. That would be with my Massachusetts accent.
Deeper it is then. We'll wrap that one up. And Q, what are you going to be pitching today?
So, as I think we've talked about, I've been playing some Link's Awakening on my Nintendo Switch. I found myself in the Color Dungeon. And in the Color Dungeon, I came across a mechanic that I thought was pretty fun, which is there's an enemy that you can kind of hit and then they turn into a ball, and then you got to pick up the ball and you got to sort of dunk it in a hole. And that got me down this path of thinking about what if enemies were balls, and what if you could play a sport like that? So walking a little bit away from the Zelda-ness of this, it got me down thinking, what if I had RPG-esque, very classic classes of warriors, rogues, wizards, and you had them as players on a sports team, and there's a field full of monsters that can be sort of defeated in multiple types of ways with combinations of powers, and when they're defeated, they turn into sports balls that you can run and score with. And you can imagine this is maybe a head-to-head, two teams of 3 or 4 people each who are playing a sports game next to each other, or against each other rather, trying to defeat the on-field enemies and score the points for themselves.
Very cool. Let's go ahead and start the clock. So what I'm picturing is a multi-sport field, something that has elements of basketball and hockey and football and ways to play all of those games, maybe in like a rosary that builds outwards, or maybe in kind of crisscrossing lanes. But as you are kind of targeting these different creatures, maybe you get a sense based on its coloration, the type of ball that it's going to turn into. And then you kind of have to like position yourself to score the basket, or to run the touchdown, or to hit it in the goal, or to hit a home run, you know?
That's really cool. And so I love the idea of there's like enemies spawning on the field. There are different types of enemies. Based on the type of enemy, that dictates maybe what type of ball they turn into and how they have to be defeated, right? So if you have like if you're center essentially, and I've Googled my picture of multi-sport field, so I've got a construct of what it looks like. But, you're playing as like the main person is a warrior, and then the warrior might need wizards to like shoot frost rays and slow down an enemy or slow down the opposing team. And then you have like rogues that can dash, and of course the warriors are going to do the most like on-field damage potentially to the enemies, or be able to sort of throw the ball the furthest. But I love the idea of building a character to be like good at DPS and 3-pointers.
How is battling going to work? Let's think about that. Maybe you can spec your character to be able to perform like 3 different types of sports at once, and you use sports-based attacks, and so you can map like a tennis racket or a football helmet or whatever to your different face buttons, and you can kind of press them as appropriate as you're kind of either dashing through hordes of smaller enemies like in Dynasty Warrior games, or maybe as you are fighting them one-on-one like in a Persona game in a turn-based system. I don't know what it looks like.
I think we have a good analog here in Madden football, because Madden has that sort of mechanic where if you're playing as offense and you throw an interception, the entire move set of your characters has to change to become the sort of defensive move set. So I like the idea of when you're in defense mode, and maybe the, look and feel might, the moment to moment might feel more arcadey like an NFL Blitz or something, but when you're on defense, your tackle and stuff could be a really basic, like 3 types of character abilities, like swinging your sword, shooting ice rays, that sort of thing, depending on what kind of character you are. But then when an enemy is defeated or when you have the ball, those same abilities are now your offensive type, in which case you are passing, throwing, and shooting, or kicking, depending on what type of ball it is. It's actually a lot of control switching now in my head, but maybe there's sort of like generic actions you can map to offense and defense. And then there's kind of the mode of if the enemies have the ball or if the other team, depending on if you're going against AI or you're going against another group of people, that dictates whether or not you're in sort of attack mode and your shooting abilities, which is what defense looks like, or like on-field passing and stuff, like what offense looks like. And so you're building a character of like, this person's a good point guard. They're quick. They can pass great. And they've got also this rage attack that frightens all the enemies away from them.
I'm still a bit, my head's still a bit swimming in all of this,
Yeah.
So I'm getting a lot of information here and I'd like to consolidate. So are the teams meaningfully kind of going up against each other like you would get in a football game? Or are they kind of doing their own thing, fighting monsters that turn into balls and just kind of racing against the clock, so to speak, whoever gets the most points within a certain amount of time? How much direct opposition is there between teams here?
Maybe the monster phase is more the equivalent of the tip-off in an NBA game or the face-off in a hockey game, where a bunch of monsters are released onto the field and the first one to be defeated, that locks in the game type or something, or the way that you have to score. And then really the rest of the monsters on field when you're either football running or, sort of hockey skating or basketball sort of passing. The monsters then just become like extra obstacles that could like grab you or slow you down, and you have to like shake them off while you have the ball and that sort of thing. But really now it's both teams fighting over the ball until there's a score. So the phases are defeat the monster, that locks in the type, and then it is magical powers and abilities PvP teams until one of the teams like gets the ball successfully over into the opposing goal.
Interesting. So let's think about the kind of aesthetic presentation. What would be a really kind of slick, obviously we could go very kind of sportsy type theming, but
sure.
What's going to be the unique hook of visually? What's going to be kind of maybe a story element that can ground all of this together?
One of the games in recent memory that was really good at telling stories and doing this, obviously, oh my God, it's not Severed. It was the basketball game.
Is it Pyre?
It is.
Or is that the newer one?
No, that's Pyre. That's right. You've got all my video game names today, H. Thank you. I lost them and you found them this week. Yeah, so Pyre had that great sort of, it had a wonderful aesthetic and it was this 2D type of thing. But I think if you're going to do PvP and some RPG-ish character ability stuff, it might be fun to blend the NFL 2K perspective of they did interesting stuff where when you're a running back, you're actually behind the running back on the field, and it felt very visceral with something like a Smite, which is a sort of third person behind the back MOBA where people are able to cast abilities. So I think if you like keep it very on the field, and maybe you do a season is like a campaign, and then that way you can actually do like new stories and stuff in the same way that live games like to do, but you release them as seasons of the sport.
Okay.
It's like this season you're uncovering a plot with so-and-so. You could do a kind of fighting game storytelling style of interstitials and then cutting into sports matches.
Yeah, all right. I would really love if all of the UI elements were very much kind of like the American sports presentations on TV, like you would get on ESPN, and maybe even like cuts to commercials and those wipes with the network logos, and everything is a little bit kind of like aggressive and just like a tad garish.
Yeah, and everything, there's like metal holograms appearing on the field when you score and all that stuff. I love that too, because this really opens the door to have, when the game is going on, having announcers that are saying things like, now he is dangerously low on mana. I don't know how he's going to get that sort of crappy stuff would be great.
Yeah, I wonder if that can in any way like really up the tension. If having announcers would improve or take away from the experience of playing it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe not. I think at least something you could do is pull inspiration from your Blood Bowls of the world and have maybe these matches taking place if you're going to different cities or something on this long journey, you're fighting with a bunch of like different species and different people in the audience. So you could get some people who are dressed up like a team, and you could get some, well, just straight up goblins that are painted in their favorite team color. So maybe, if you wanted to play up the comedy angle, I think you could do a lot with crowd work.
Let's close that down and let's come up with a name.
If it wasn't a complete ripoff, Diablo.
Oh, like a Super Bowl.
Yeah, but there's got to be something better than that. Thinking like RPG, D&D. It's hard to do something like Roll Bowl or something without it sounding
maybe
super
like
cheesy.
The Monster Fighting League, the MFL.
The MFL. Yeah, and you're all just monsters with different abilities. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing that, but it's not trying to go for, I think, the angle that those things have gone for, which is like, everybody's going to be eviscerated with swords. This is more a little bit taking that RPG slant to it.
Yeah. Sword and Scorcery. I feel like we've done that before.
Sword and Scorcery. Maybe just Scorcery.
Scorcery. I guess we can see how that comes out looking when we make the episode title.
Scorcery. I've Googled it, and it's just trying to correct me, so we might be okay.
All right. Let's go for Scorcery then and move on to our community pitch. This one comes from Matt Taylor, who says, H&Q, I heard you needed ideas. Hakuna Matata, I have ideas for days. Wonderful. This is an idea I've wanted to see in games for a while. Imagine a God Sim game like SimCity, Black and White, Civilization, etc., except you control different deities. Most of the deities would have powers of weather, god of thunder, god of rain, god of floods, god of wind, etc. However, other non-weather-based powers could be used, fire, pollution, death, etc. The goal of the game would be to grow your civilization from infancy to modern times and beyond, similar to the Civilization games or one of the stages of Spore. Each god would need sacrifices to power it up. Maybe each god has varying levels of power. God of rain level 1 equals light showers, good for crops, but level 5 equals category 5 level hurricanes, good for taking out an evil civilization bent on world domination. That would be enough to get started with. I'd love to hear what other gods you can come up with, how the sacrifices work, and what powers they'll have. Awesome, let's go ahead and start the clock.
Shout out to Mr. Taylor for a Black and White reference, one of my favorite classic PC games. I guess that counts as classic now, right?
Yeah, it's classic now.
Man, okay. Grow your civilization from infancy to modern times.
So one of the things, oddly enough, that this makes me think of is Sonic Adventure, where you're in the Chow Garden, where you're raising those little creatures, and they're just kind of like neutral little baby things until you start feeding them items that you pick up in the levels. And based on what you feed them, they'll grow up to become different types of chows with different power sets. So maybe you kind of have this kind of god nursery where all of these neutral beings of exceptional power are kind of growing up And based on some of the choices that you make, how you choose to socialize them, how you choose to feed them, or maybe even what you choose to sacrifice to them, and how the people go about worshiping, then their power sets grow and change in different ways. And you have maybe like 90% control over that, but there's always going to be a little bit that's kind of left up to chance. And it's your prerogative to create kind of a balanced group of gods. But then the more gods you take into your pantheon, maybe the more infighting there's going to be.
Or you have a limited number of god slots at any one point.
Yep.
And only through getting people to stay in balance or something can you unlock, or maybe causing different things to happen in the civilization can get you unlocks to different types of gods. It's like there's been a lot of particular, celebrations or something recently, and that unlocks the god of partying?
Maybe you're one god. There are a bunch of other gods, and they're all gods of like this or that or something. And you can affect the civilization that you're presiding over. It could be this kind of like ancient Greek type of setup.
Yeah.
In so far as your god has influence over it. So a god of rain could make it rain, influence crops, this and that. And what you want to do is increase sacrifices to you while decreasing sacrifices to the other gods, because then they'll become more powerful. And, maybe there's aspects of socialization that you can do up in Mount Olympus or whatever the equivalent would be to try to make friends with the other gods, but there's always going to be some that are hostile to you, and you really want to keep them from rising to power.
Oh man, that just gave me this thought of, what if you had sort of two phases of this, where one is very black and white, maybe minus the giant monster that you control, where you're doing very practical things, you're kind of casting your godlike powers and trying to make your people happy, and then like as a year comes to a close or something like that, then you get a little interstitial you as just like a schlubby physical embodiment in Mount Olympus, and you get to kind of walk around and have other conversations with the other gods and like find out what their towns are up to and see if you can like cut deals to get them to help you in the next year.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, listen, my military strength is pretty low. We need the god of war to come over and do us a couple favors this year. In return, I will make sure that my people get you a certain amount of crops because I'm the god of, I guess, thunder and water or something like that.
Thunder, vital for crops, obviously. So that's interesting. So you have very limited capabilities to support your people, and so there's a necessary kind of trading that has to go on. You do them some favors, they do you some favors, but of course, maybe the ones that are naturally in the highest demand are the ones that you're going to want to kind of keep your eye on the most to make sure that they're not growing more powerful than everyone else.
The thing that's terrifying about this is that we're just kind of making Civilization, but with just like a different fictional wrapper, aren't we?
Okay, so what are ways where actually being a god could mix up the formula then?
Because the example he uses here of God of Rain, the arc of a god, and again, God of Rain 1 is like light showers, good for crops. 5 is destruction. So how do we, maybe this game is more about the arc and evolution of goddom and how, and maybe it's also in a way commentary on how like the idea or thought of a god starts as like potentially a very innocent / thing that people can't explain, but then ends up becoming sort of twisted and turned in such a way that it's a negative force.
Okay. So we've explored in the past, we've done games that allow you to kind of like shape history and legends and stories that are told over time. And I feel like we're kind of getting close to some things that we've done before. So let's really focus on like the experiential aspect of using powers and coming up with interesting ways to, this is kind of ringing a bell as well. Have we done a game in the past where It's about gods that are, yes, we have, about gods that are waging war with one another and using their people and their powers to fight the other gods and the other civilizations.
That sounds familiar.
That's why we're kind of running into similar territory here. So let's mix it up. Let's come up with a different grounding to kind of run with.
Yeah, so we've kind of done the angle of gods being powered by influence, right? So I'm trying to think of like another way of coming at the god thing, which is maybe it is worth pursuing some of this back and forth, hanging out in Mount Olympus and almost having like a relationship simulator with the other gods. It's a little Fire Emblem-y now where you can chat with the other teachers and do them favors and stuff, and then depending on your like on the job god performance in these sort of off-season times or these off-week times, that can kind of ensure that you're fulfilling your miracles as you like keep your meters full and keeping your people happy, and maybe that kind of unlocks the ability for you to have a certain number of actions or things that you can accomplish like as your people, and you're doing the sort of god mode overview, the more RTS-like angle on the thing.
I wonder if we called our previous pitch God mode. That I'm going to have to search our website for that. This idea of kind of grounding it in forming alliances, breaking alliances, maybe the civilizations are such an afterthought. Maybe it is kind of like a social type of simulator.
Good Faith was the one where you're destroying a god. We can do this. We can crack this. Put our minds to it here. What do churches say that gods need? They need money, don't they? You go to a church and they pass around the basket, or at least they do in Catholic church, and certainly in Christian church. There's mega churches. There's all sorts of like distorted forms of worship. I wonder if there's something there about you have to like maybe like the on the ground stuff is the only thing that you can really manage and upgrade and upkeep and stuff is churches. Like you've got little, we're going to put in a new church over here. So that gives me a certain amount of more population influence. And as churches are installed and you upgrade them, they attract different people coming to them. And you're trying to balance how many people are worshiping you in all of these different locations. And that in turn gives you the currency to go trade during the relationship simulator portion of this.
So almost kind of like running it like a business then.
Right. And then literally the deposits go straight into God's pocket.
That's interesting. I mean, I think it would be even more interesting if you were not supernatural in this situation, where if you were just like the head of a mega church trying to build a corporate empire of churches with no actual God in sight.
That would be interesting. If there was
a real God, that would kind of legitimize the mega churches trying to kind of extort money out of people.
And then maybe as you kind of build an increasing network of these churches, this is how you can get a little bit to what Matthew is pitching here. You can start to level up the crazy things and the spectacle that you're able to pull off to convince people that you've made it rain or that you've summoned a bunch of crops. And a hurricane, you can eventually start taking credit for natural disasters when you have enough people that believe in you. And so your goddom is rising up the ranks, but purely through defrauding your worshipers.
All right, pretending to be a god. I like this. We are out of time. I think we settled on something kind of cool there at the end. So what are we going to name this one?
Hear me out. Fraud complex.
That's very good. That's right off the bat. Man, it's coming in strong.
I feel so bad because I feel like this pitch by Matthew is in such earnest, but boy, oh boy, since we've been there, we had to get
writing
weird.
Into playwright, you write one thing and sometimes it comes out being completely different.
Matthew, you can go tell everyone you invented fraud complex.
Anyways, thank you very much for sending that in. I wish we had the episode number of the other God game that was very similar to the one that we were originally going down the pathway of that we could give for further listening.
Okay, here's two potentials for you. There's episode 75, which contains a pitch for a game called Good Faith, which is you're destroying gods. And we also have episode 81, where we have two things this could potentially be. God damn it, all is one word. And Age of Empires 4, you did not see that coming. So
right, not that second one. That's okay. I remember that episode, and I don't think that's the one we were thinking of. But yeah, I'm not.
It might be
actually
that
could be
75.
God damn it as well. I don't know.
We also have God of War: A Simulation in episode 82.
We're just like proper religious in here. Last week we had our bridal Bible, so we're just like forming our own little cult.
My God, yeah. The legal disclaimer: Playwright is not a religion. Do not do anything in our name other than review us on iTunes. And of course, write in your video game ideas.
Please pray.
How would we write in video game ideas, H? Tell me how.
Well, you can chisel it on stone tablets and send that off to playwrightcast@gmail.com.
P.O.
You
box.
can go to our holy books at playwrightcast.com/pitch, or you can be our sacred messenger and tweet us at playwrightcast.
And remember, Playwright is special thank you to our Lord and Savior PROTODOME for the use of our theme song Hello World off the album Blue Noise, and be sure to go check out the other great books in the Cane and Rinse Bible, like the first book, the Cane and Rinse podcast, where they review video games. There's a lot of prose from Saint Leon in there. I think it's pretty good stuff. Also, there's the Sausage Factory, the second book, where God's Wrath is certainly a lot less, but a lot more things like Burnout come into play. And then, of course, Sound of Play, which contains all of our appropriate hymns and songs that you must learn to sing on a weekly basis.
It's truly the greatest story ever told.
Yes.
Well, with that, let's come up with one miniature pitch. I'm going to pitch a game where you are trying to destroy all world religions. So just the opposite of what we've done.
Perfect. Tear it all down.
The reset switch there. Yeah. Anyways, we'll thank you for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next week.
Bye.